1, 0, and liftoff.
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the Recipe for Greatness podcast. I'm Jay Greenwood. Now, the goal of this podcast is we talk to the founders behind some of the best food companies in the UK to find out how they did it and tease out the knowledge and skills that they've used to grow their business. This week's founder is Hugo. He founded the events booking platform Vista. They work with some of the best caterers in the country, including a pretty awesome pie brand called Crafty Pies. They have raised £2.7 million in total, and they do amazing events. They fed celebrities ranging from movie stars to pop stars, and they do events all across the country. Hugo is an amazing founder. We sit down and talk about how they use data to grow their business. We talk about a funny story about how they got their first booking within 5 minutes of then setting up their company. And he also gives amazing hints, tips and advice to caterers on how to stand out and how to really secure that booking and to grow their business. So please enjoy my conversation with Hugo from Vista. Well, hi Hugo, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jay.
Awesome, right. So I'd like to start this a bit of the young Hugo. So tell me like a little bit about when you were younger, like what was your ambition? Like, did you have anything you wanted to do when you were younger at all?
It's an interesting one, and it's probably it's not too relevant to Feast It. Before Feast It, I was a journalist at The Independent for 2 years, and that was always growing up where I was sort of hoping to end up, to be honest. And I spent a lot of time in my sort of teens trying to get work experience as a journalist, and did English at uni, and then went straight into a job at The Independent, where I was for about 2 years after that. And actually it was through kind of through the work that I was doing there and the people that I was living with that actually we kind of first started talking about Feast It. And oddly, it kind of, I was doing quite a lot of writing about food there as well. And actually Feast It kind of grew out of that. So while it was, Feast It itself wasn't what I necessarily had in mind for my sort of dream in life when I was growing up, it was sort of as an indirect result of working in journalism, which was really cool.
Yeah. So, I reached out to someone Rory, one of our mutual contacts that we know, and he told me that you went to a school that's had some quite high performers in it. You've had Emma Watson and a few actors and things like that. So what was it like going to a school where there was quite big high profile characters that are still quite very relevant at the time as well?
To be perfectly honest, it wasn't something I was really aware of when I was there. It's only kind of come out since. I didn't really realize that it was a particularly good. It's called the Dragon, but it was like a particularly good school for actors in particular.
Yeah.
But the only one who I can really remember, to be honest, was Emma Watson, who I think was a couple of years older than me. And she actually, the funny story was that she came back to school after filming, I think, one of them. And I just remember every door she tried to open, someone would do like a spell. And then I think she was back for like a week or something like that. And then very understandably was like, nah, this isn't worth it. And
what a nightmare that must have been.
Got to elsewhere. Yeah, that was, the person that I just remember it being a big deal that Tim Henman had gone there. That was the cool one that I remembered, to be honest. But then I found out that he actually left after a couple of years to go to tennis school, wherever that is. But anyway,
so
that was...
you mentioned that you went into journalism, and I know you studied English at university. Was that just was there a goal when you chose English as a subject, or was it just?
fundamentally, it was a bit of an interesting one, because I actually originally applied to do politics straight out of uni, which I enjoyed at school. I did it for A level as well as English, and I just and basically I remember having a chat with the school about it, and basically decided that politics was not as tough a course to get into a better uni through, which is, depending on how you look at it, is or isn't right. The school reckoned it was at the time, and I was like, yeah, sounds great, cool, I'll do that. And then the more I made that decision and sort of thought about it for a few weeks afterwards, and really didn't sit well, particularly as, you know, I knew the fact that I wanted to become a journalist at that point, or that's what I thought then. Although politics certainly doesn't exclude you from doing that. I just sort of changed my mind and had to go back and redo my entire application process, because decided that actually English was what I wanted to do. It's what I was going to enjoy. And I think it was very much the right decision. I really enjoyed it as a degree, although, you know, it has, unless you become a journalist, which I did, it doesn't have too much practical use.
What was it like working in journalism compared to, I mean, because what you do now is so different. So what was it like compared, you know, what was it like doing journalism as a career?
It was interesting. It was, I did a very specific type of it, which was mainly news desk journalism at The Independent, which I don't really know what the best way of relating to something, but I kind of say it's almost like a sort of, and I only really know this from films, but like a sort of, you know, trading floor at like a bank or whatever. It was just chaotic, people shouting all over the place. You're expected to write about probably a minimum of 10 articles a day, something like that. That would probably be a bit of a slow day. And
wow,
you just, and it was super intense, particularly when you're, you know, straight out of uni, and but it was definitely fun. Like your day would go like that, but it was interesting. I mean, I always think it's like the way that the thing that I always mention is that, like, it's given me a load of odd knowledge. I must have written about, you know, probably in excess of 2,000 articles when I was there, and I've got so much odd knowledge in the back of my head that I wouldn't, if you asked me a question about it, I wouldn't be able to answer the question on it. But if you told me the answer, I'd be like, oh yeah, I kind of did know that. I was in there somewhere. But yeah, you would write. It's crazy. Some days you'd write 15 articles, and if someone asked you afterwards, like, you know, what did you write an article on today? You'd be like, no idea.
And was was it really pressured deadlines as well? Like, you have to make that deadline. There's no ifs, buts, you know, if you're here until 10, then you're here until 10 sort of thing.
I mean, yeah, you were there on scheduled hours. So it wouldn't be like you'd work late, but you would just be judged if you didn't do a certain number of articles. And actually, fairly or unfairly, lots of it was measured on the number of shares that you would get from the articles that you wrote, which was quite interesting. So it just meant that there was a, you know, there'd be a list of articles which you could, you know, pick to write, and it basically meant that it was quite selective about the ones that you thought were quite shareable content. You'd make sure that, and it was done in a queue system, so you'd write an article at a certain pace because you think that you would then get to the next one, which would be more shareable. But anyway, whether that's a sustainable, healthy thing, or gosh, modern journalism in a terrible light, probably.
So did you begin to learn then things about how to, you know, make things more shareable then? Did you sort of start to pick up on, you know, this is going to work better than this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically it was just things that were good, you know, clickbaity kind of articles would always be the most shared, and lots of the art of it was in writing like a good catchy social media headline for it, which you knew that people would go for, and as well. So that was like quite a bit of the skill, although they had specifically designated, you know, SEO editors as well, who would refine all of their headlines of articles. It was a really, really interesting process, to be honest. And it was very sort of fast and furious work, but a really fascinating thing to do.
And is writing still a big passion of yours?
Yeah, it is. I wish I had a bit more time to do a bit. To be honest, in the context of Vista, I don't really do too much. I'd love to do it more, but yeah, in the early days, I read a lot of the blog posts, a lot of sort of the website copy, the email copy, etc. And And yeah, I still really, really enjoy it. And it's one of those things in life that, you know, I'd love to, you know, at some stage get back into, hopefully when and if I have more time at some point.
Amazing. So let's get on to sort of 2016. Sort of how long had you been working at the Independent at that point?
So I'd been there for almost 3 years, I think. Yeah.
And when was entrepreneurship and business sort of on the radar? Was it something you kind of felt you wanted to do, or was it just like a spontaneous moment where you thought, we've got a great idea here?
So to be perfectly honest, it was I started it with a friend. I point because he's through there, but he's someone I've known for my entire life, and we had kind of, I mean, we'd spent hours and hours and probably days or weeks talking about like potential business ideas, and it was never more of like, and it was never more of, you know, like a fun conversations that you would have between lots of friends, I would imagine, and it was always pretty hypothetical. But we both got to a point where we were living together, and we got to a point in our respective jobs where we had kind of got to the end of the natural cycles there. So I'd been in a particular role at the Independent for a year, and was pushing for something new, and, you know, had and I think it was going to happen, but it wasn't going to happen for a long time, and just was feeling a little kind of unsatisfied about that. So it's just generally sort of looking for new roles. And he was in a relatively similar position within his company as well. I think slightly stifled by the lack of progression. And we just decided we were both pretty young at this point. I think we were 24. 24. And so decided that we would take 3 months to try and get Feasted off the ground. It was an idea that we talked about for quite a long time. And before we started it, we did quite a bit of, you know, while we were still in our last jobs, we did quite a bit of, you know, weekend research, just sort of trying to work out whether this was a good idea, whether there were any competitors out there who were doing it. And the more we got into it, the more it seemed like it was a relatively logical thing that could work, that didn't really exist at the time, and we thought it seemed like a very logical thing to kind of go and pursue. To be perfectly honest, when we left those our respective roles there, it wasn't necessarily with we obviously had ambitions. We wanted it to go very well, but if you told us the extent of how far it would go, would have, you know, absolutely bitten your hand off for it at the moment, to be honest. But it was it was sort of, let's see if we can get this off the ground. If not, we're still young. We've got I've got a bit more, you know, this is going to be a blip in, you know, our careers if it all goes terribly. And thankfully we managed to sort of kick things off a bit from there, and have kind of built Feasted up to the level that it's at now.
Amazing. I think that's like a perfect time for so I've defined Feasted. I think it's an amazing company, but how would you describe Feasted in sort of one sentence for people who just kind of aren't as familiar with it? How would you describe it as?
So it's booking event services online. We started in food and drink, so booking caterers, largely street food, for all manner of events, be those weddings, corporate events. Expanded to provide bars as well for those events, and the long-term goal for us is something we're working towards at the moment, is becoming 360 event supply, so enabling people to book not just their food, their drinks, but their marquee, their staffing, their photographer, their videographer, the band. That's obviously a bit of a way off, but our emphasis, we're effectively a marketplace platform for booking event suppliers. However, we are a managed marketplace, which means that we put a massive emphasis on quality of suppliers. So it's really not just an anyone can join kind of platform. It's a highly vetted process to see if we think that you kind of live up to the criteria that we need. So we like to think that if you book anyone through Vista, they're going to be of a fantastically high level of quality.
Yeah, that's a great service as well. I mean, I've worked with you, and the feedback I get from clients as well, they say, it's a game changer. It makes their life so much easier. So I think you and Digby have done an amazing job on that. So
well, thank you.
Yeah. So want to touch back on sort of 2016, and you mentioned you started with the co-founder. How do you think about starting businesses with a co-founder? Do you think that's had a huge impact on how the business has gone, or do you think if you'd done it on your own, it would have just been the same sort of place it is now?
Yeah, I think I'd be pretty candid about this. There's no way I would have done it by myself, and to be honest, there's no way I would have done it with anyone else. I would have said we had a obviously we're very, very good friends going back a long way, so it wasn't so we've been able to, throughout the whole process of Feast It, have incredibly candid conversations, and there's never been any awkwardness about anything, which has been fantastic. And for me, I personally, and this isn't to say that it doesn't work for anyone, for everyone, but I would find it very hard to be a sole founder of a business, purely because of the ideas bouncing part of it. And that's quite literally the only reason, is that I find it hard to validating my own opinions by myself. I've always found a very tough thing to do.
Yeah.
And when you've got a co-founder whose opinion that you trust, it makes a huge difference there. And just that first level of sense checking on everything, I think, has made a huge difference to us. And also, I mean, it's not a bad thing to start a company with a friend. It's always it's a bit more fun.
And have you two sort of found a way, as you guys have sort of, I imagine, grown the company together, have you guys worked out any strategies or like tips or anything to how you kind of manage any conflict, or do you guys just let it all out and then come back together, because the friendship kind of always outlasts any problem?
Between us?
Yeah, between us, yeah.
I would say it's just addressing it up front. We've never really felt the need, I would say, or I would hope, or I certainly haven't, to hold back on anything that we feel about the way that we're doing things. So like there's absolutely no stigma attached to saying that you think the work that the other person's doing is maybe a bit rubbish, or needs to be completely reevaluated, and that it's all completely wrong. And to be honest, I think those are it might sound over the top, but I think those are sort of the values that we really do like to kind of live with in the business as a whole, which is just being like very, very open about people, like everyone's opinions towards the work that we're doing, and saying like, if you think something's rubbish, like it's your responsibility to call it out, because the reality is that we're a business of relatively young, inexperienced people, and we're going to get stuff wrong, and that's totally fine. It's just so important to call it out when you do.
Yeah, well, since you've touched on that, you've set me up perfectly for a question. So I've spoken to a few people you work with. I've also looked, and I've seen that I think was it like a software engineer or something that was leaving, and you guys created a jingle for him, was it? Or
Deck. Oh yeah.
I get the real sense that there is a real close community. I mean, I know as well that since this has all happened in lockdown, that you and Digby actually moved in together to actually keep the business going. And so how do you create such a close culture where everyone just feels so a part of it, and everyone feels, real, almost, I don't want to say family, because it's sort of, maybe wrong, but everyone just feels so close and sort of together on the same mission?
Well, I mean, it was, in terms of living together, it was me, Digby, and Yusuf, our head of finance as well. It was
amazing.
Pretty intense stuff
Wow.
But it was fun. It's good. I always feel slightly uncomfortable answering that question, because obviously it's something that we've built, and I feel like I find it hard to comment on the cultural side of what we've built, because obviously I'm going to say it's amazing and I love it. But fundamentally, it just comes down to the fact that I think our approach has always just been just employing people that we really like on a personal level, and that we think are going to get on with the rest of the team. And it's nothing more complicated than that. I think a bit of the issue that we maybe both had with our last jobs was that there's nothing more unpleasant than working with unpleasant people, and you spend so much of your life there that it's just not worth it. And I guess that's something that we've really tried to kind of bring forward to Feast It, and just make sure we're enjoying working with the people we work with on a daily basis, because it makes such a big difference to how the whole company works. And like, to be honest, it's nothing more complicated than that. And I think that in itself has just bred a good team culture. Everyone's nice, everyone gets on with each other. We do quite a lot together socially as well, but I would like to think most of that's out of choice rather than anything that we're sort of mandating that people have to do. Who knows? But yeah, we've just got a lovely team, pretty much. That's all it is.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to go back to sort of the beginning, sort of maybe like 2016. And I imagine, there must have been a lot of unknowns for you, where you were entering this space and it's all, well, where do we start? So how did you guys approach trying to figure that out?
Yeah, well, we very specifically started just in street food in terms of who we were going to be working with and who the platform would support. So we partnered with a development agency who really understood what the product was, and actually just instantly kind of clocked it. And they were fantastic. They really understood what it was that we wanted to build, understood why it could work, and just like really got on board with the whole thing, which made life pretty easy from that side of things to start with. And we made this decision to go for street food providers from the start, just because a few reasons. Firstly, we firmly felt that it was the best place to find talented chefs at the moment, to find young talented chefs. There's nowhere better than street food, and had a fundamental belief that that more events could do with having street food providers serving at them, which I really do firmly believe. I think we've all been to sort of enough weddings and whatever they might be, corporate events, where the catering is just is so unremarkable that you don't even think about it, and fundamentally believe very strongly that needs to change, because food's the most important part of an event by a long way. So that meant that we then basically went out and found and tried to identify who we thought were the very best street food suppliers. Obviously, there's great things like organizations around who do that, time out lists, etc. And obviously tried quite a bit of food, which is quite a nice way to start a company. And pretty much just launched with a list of who we thought these best caterers were on the platform. That sounds like I say that like it was the easiest thing in the world. Like, we just launched with them. We called them up, and probably called most of them up about 19 times.
Yeah. Did you have seek out any advisors or any mentors at the beginning, or did you kind of just figure out yourself and just go that way?
We did. So we within that 3-month period, we raised a small round of investment, which was basically done through our development agency making wireframes of the website. So basically, you could sort of, which were JPEGs of the website, so you could go through it as if it existed. Obviously, it hadn't been built yet, but and then basically just hitting up LinkedIn in like an extreme way. I must have sent about, I don't know, 8,000 LinkedIn messages to random people within this time period. And we just got introduced to people who would introduce us to people who would introduce you to someone else. And it was just incredibly drawn out process, but it did, which was, no bad thing for us to go through at all. But ultimately, yeah, it let us raise this round of funding at the start. And we got some brilliant investors on board in those sort of quite early days, who have been really good kind of mentoring figures for us throughout the whole process. So I find it quite hard to name specific names, because There are actually probably more like 10 of them who have been like that for us in terms of giving us a lot of time, being really, really great mentors, helping us out with everything we're doing, and just being, another sort of springboard for ideas.
And what do you think about at the start? You've got the choice where you're creating something and you can either put something out there quite quickly and get feedback from people, or you can spend a long time internally just creating something in your head, the idea of sort of something that's perfect. So in your mind, what's more important, sort of the speed of getting something out there, or actually getting something that's more refined and a bit more perfect?
As ever, the answer is always compromise, but I would say that speed is more important. I think it was actually something I was going to mention, because I think that one of the things you might ask, you were going to ask me, is what kind of literature that I'd read around business. But one of the things that I wanted to mention was there was like a Paul Graham article, which actually it's like 13 things you should know about starting a startup, and one of them is just do everything really, really fast, which I completely agree with, because the reality is that you as clever as you think you might be, the answer is that you're not. And you need things to be tested by people to know whether they're the right thing or not. And that's something we've always tried to do here. So if we have an idea or how to improve the platform, or how to improve the business, we try and implement it really, really fast, and then refine it from there if we think there are tweaks that need making, etc. So we've always had that approach to pretty much everything, and that was the case at the start as well. You obviously don't want to rush stuff and put it out in a way that is terrible for customer or supplier experience, but also the feedback that you get is so valuable in those early stages that we were keen to make sure that we got something out.
Sure.
In good time.
What do you think about the concept? So I was listening to one of your interviews before, and you mentioned that in your sort of progression at The Independent, you sort of end up doing the iPad news and sort of developing the app for that. And obviously it's very similar to now with Thesis, for kind of very much a platform business. Do you think there was sort of an element of, I don't like the term, but sort of like the fake it before you, like until you make it kind of concept, where you kind of might exaggerate a few elements on the CV a little bit to kind of get you to the place you want to be a little bit?
Well, I would on the CV, I would say not so much, because The Independent was my only real job before Vista. I kind of just fell into that role there with the app side of things, and I wasn't literally developing the app. I was working as the sort of the kind of I guess it was kind of the term is actually product manager. So working with the developers on the app to sort of sense check everything that was going on. Sure. I had no idea what a product manager was then, but that was what it was. What in terms of like in terms of fake it while you make it?
So I mean, do you think that kind of helped open the doors a little bit, where you could kind of maybe exaggerate a few things, saying, "Oh, it kind of increase your knowledge base a little bit"? Well, sort of say, you've worked on app development or platform development.
If you're asking whether I've talked up any future jobs to any past jobs for potential future investors, the answer is obviously. Loads. But that's what everyone does, right?
I think that's been quite helpful to kind of, some people maybe might be a bit unsure about whether or not to do it, but do you think that kind of helped you kind of maybe get some of those doors open a little bit faster?
I'm very much of the belief that you can pretty much say anything you want as long as you can back it up somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So, now one thing that whenever I hear you talk, you're very much, there's always, with Feasted, there's always a goal or a target. So for you guys, how important do you think sort of setting goals and targets are within your company and your progression?
It's totally vital to everything we do, whether that's a date for a project finishing, or a monthly target figure for how much we want to do. I think it's so vital, and it just gets people working towards something in a way that you just can't manufacture through anything else, I think, personally. And like I think also you can't underestimate the damage that unrealistic targets can do on people can do as well. And that's definitely a mistake that we've made in the past as well, is, you know, like shooting for the stars when we maybe didn't necessarily need to. And then when it becomes relatively apparent that a target is probably not going to be hit halfway through or whatever it might be, it can be quite demoralizing. So yeah, I think setting sensible targets, which, you know, are probably is incredibly important. Not saying that I'm particularly necessarily good at doing that, but I totally get why it's so important. Yeah, it's a very vital thing.
And do you have any like hints or tips about how to create like a good goal that's, you know, something you can measure, or at least, you know, measure how you're doing?
I would say in terms of creating goals, just don't work in isolation. Make sure you're speaking to the people who are actually going to be doing stuff, and then, you know, finding some sort of compromise between there. But yeah, not working in isolation. Set targets, very, very important. In terms of measuring them, I mean, we try and measure absolutely everything that we can, and like I'd say within our business and every business, that's such a vital thing in general, is just you're only as powerful as everything that you measure. So the reality is you can do something great and you reckon it's great, but actually if you haven't, you know, measured it appropriately along the way or got the data from it, then it's half as useful or less than half as useful as it could have been otherwise.
Yeah. And I've also heard you speak about sometimes when you hit these targets, sometimes you don't celebrate them because you're always focused on the next target, next goal. And I know that was previously in the past. Have you guys changed around celebrating sort of your wins, or is it always still, how can we keep going?
I think it's sadly it's probably the latter still, because it's still, to be honest, it I really get how important it is to celebrate your wins, and I really wish that we were probably a bit better than that. But the reality is that, I don't know, we're painfully aware of the fact that we're still a young business, and there's still so much that we're getting wrong, and so much hopefully for us to be able to go on and achieve, that I think we're just painfully conscious of the fact that it's a really, really long journey. And while we've done great stuff so far, like, we're still, you know, only a few years into it, and there is so much that we want to do. I'm sure, well, hopefully that will change with time, because the further we get, the better things will start feeling, I'm sure. But yeah, it's still like, there's still, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because there's a massive hunger for us and for the rest of the team as well to just crack on as much as possible.
Yeah.
That's not to say we don't, you know, obviously if something great happens, we'll all go down the pub on a Friday night and have a really good time.
Yeah. Well, brings me on to, sets me up perfectly for the next point of, tell me about the time when you guys first launched Vista and you turned on the website, you know, you were all ready to go. Sort of what happened? What was...
Oh yeah, that was quite a fun story. It was like I think it ended up being our second ever booking. So when we first launched the platform, we turned on AdWords and put, I don't know, maybe like 50 quid into AdWords, like really not that much money. And within about, I think it was probably in about 20 minutes, we'd had like a 20 grand inquiry from Samsung, which was obviously this big, oh my God moment. Yeah. And, you know, like, Jesus Christ, we're going to be like retiring in a year. This is amazing. Let's just keep doing this, more of this, more of this. Obviously, it turned out that really was not going to be the norm. It was just the ultimate example of complete and utter beginner's luck. And it turned out quickly, and also like our kind of celebrations quickly went from like, great, like obviously this is brilliant, but like, how do we go about organizing this? Yeah. I mean, like, I could probably talk for 2 hours about the Samsung event in the Millennium Gloucester Hotel in Kensington and all that happened with that, but it was definitely worth it. And it went well. So it was all good in the end. But that was a bit of a baptism of fire.
Yeah, I've definitely had a few of those moments where you say yes and you're really happy, and then suddenly you go, wait, I've actually got to do this. And then you realize it's the next challenge is very quickly there. But that's an amazing story. I can't believe so quickly just that booking came in. You must have been over the moon.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were I couldn't quite believe it. To be honest, I sort of questioned it for a while. Like, I was sure that someone was it was like a friend who was playing a prank or something, but it turned out it was real. But yeah, it was a good thing. And like on that one, I think we'd probably, again, also maybe to a detriment, inclined to say yes to pretty much everything that has come our way, and we're starting to get a bit better at that now. Actually do things which we know we're really good at and are our strong points.
Great. Well, I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to go on to sort of the final bit of this interview. So I was going to ask you about sort of any books that you feel have impacted you the most. And you mentioned there the 13 things you should know about a startup by Paul Graham. Was that one?
Yeah, it's just an article. It's super simple. Probably takes about 5 minutes to read, but I think it had quite a big impact on me when we first started this. It's pretty simple, and like there are a couple of things that I wrote down from it, points in particular that I think a couple of which I've actually already gone through that I thought were really, really important. But one of them was make sure you're doing things fast, and doing things fast and efficiently is so important, and just getting the feedback. The other one was offer surprisingly good customer service. And I think that's something that we were quite good at actually in the early days, was making sure that we went really, really over and above to make sure that all the early customers who used us, so like these Samsungs of this world, would recommend us around the place. And so I think we actually got quite a lot of our early business was through being really, really hot on the customer service front, making sure that everyone's happy, sort of maybe being like over providing for them, and making sure that everything was totally smooth. And that, I think, particularly in the early days, I'd like to think that's still what we're like now, but that was a huge value for us, and I think it's a value that we've kept. The other one was make what you make what you measure, which we touched on earlier, which is make sure you're tracking everything as much as you can. And then the last one from it that I picked out, which I think is really important, is realizing that deals fall through, and that I think something that can happen is that you can get, the Samsung one is an example of one that didn't go that way, but there have been so many moments, of course, in the years that we've been doing Vista, when something really, really exciting looks like it's going to be on the horizon, or there's a massive event that's going to go through, or something really, really cool partnership, whatever it is, but it's just kind of telling yourself that it's not done till it's done. And there's a high chance that just the way that the world works is that often these things just fall through at the last minute for whatever reason it is, and that's totally fine. And like almost coming to terms with it before they happen, I'd say is slightly safer sanity probably over the course of this, because obviously, you're going to have great deals that completely change the complexion of the company, and you're going to have loads that feel like they're going to do that and then will fall through for some reason that you might not even be able to work out why it is, but that is just a common part of the way that everything works, sadly.
Amazing, yeah. And you work with a lot of catering, street food businesses. Some of them are exceptional. So what for you do you think makes a standout food business? So just to make it a bit easier for you, would it be, you could say the food itself, or is it the presentation? Is it the service? Like, what for you is the things that really make someone do well in this industry?
Yeah, it's probably important to remember that I'm coming at this from the event side of things, so I'm not particularly qualified to talk about the restaurant side of the industry or delivery, etc. But for me, when it comes to events, of course, the quality of food is so important. But the other two aspects of it are that I would say are possibly the most important things when it comes to this event catering side of it, being friendly and being prompt in terms of responses, and like knowing, like you cannot underestimate the value of reliability when it comes to event catering. It's like the value that customers will place on that, because that's what people's massive phobia is, right? It's like it's that people are worried more about if you've booked a caterer for your wedding, obviously how good the food is massively important. But even more important than that is like, are they going to turn up on time? Actually, are they going to turn up? And I think just being so reassuring with customers that everything's all taken care of, and getting back to them in a way that makes them, like happy to be working with you. We're really confident in the reliability is so important. And then, I'm saying this is obviously great food should be taken as a given as well. Like that's incredibly big part of it. And like being passionate about your food is what's going to ultimately make the business work. But yeah, putting that with reliability and great customer service is such an important part of it.
Absolutely. So on our final point to end on, I know you mentioned before it's still early days for you because you're still very ambitious things to do, but in 2016 when you were setting this up versus sort of now, is there any words of advice you'd sort of give yourself now back to sort of 2016 Hugo when he was starting up Vista?
Yeah, probably make a few more plans for 2020. Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Take a year off. Yes, don't worry.
I would be. I'm sure I wrote a few things down for it. It's just appreciate. I think a couple of things were. It's so worth investing in brand. And I think that's one thing that we have that we didn't do so well in our first couple of years, and we're probably still a bit behind on now. But really, like it might feel like there could be more important things to be working on, but creating a strong brand that people get an affinity with is such an important thing, and that's really kind of that will have massive lasting value as well. We're an event booking platform, so to us in the early days, it maybe didn't seem as important to have our own voice, and we kind of left that to our suppliers to be the kind of voices of Vista, which sure, it had its benefits, it was great, but I wish in that time that we'd built up more of a coherent voice for us as well. So that's something we're kind of trying to do at the moment is build more of a brand that people know of and can sort of begin to associate with events. And then the other one, actually, to be honest, and you might know a bit about this, but it's just that I wish we had been more communicative with our supply base. So obviously we work with, now it's about 1,000 suppliers across the country. It's a lot. And we are like, we speak to you guys a lot, but I still don't think it's enough. And we probably in our first 2 years, we probably didn't spend enough time just on the phone with our suppliers, getting their ideas and making sure that we're completely building the platform around their needs. And I think we're starting to do that now. But I think it's such an important thing to really to really focus on early. It's also the reasons why we didn't want to. It was that there were more. The opportunities were sort of more based around, like directly chasing customers and going after money. There are reasons to do that, and we had to do that to prove the concept of the company, to try and raise more investment. But ultimately, I wish we'd spent more time on the supplier side at the start.
But there's only so much time in a day, right, that you can get things done. So yeah. Well, I think that's been amazing point to finish on, and I think amazing interview. You've given so many tips for people looking to start out about best way to structure it. So thank you. And just closing, where can people find Vista? Where can people find you?
Well, hopefully they should be able to just Google any sort of event catering, and we'll, fingers crossed, be the first thing that shows up on Google. But it's just it's just feastit.com, feast-it.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Hugo, and pleasure chatting, and hopefully catch up again soon. So thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
Guys, thank you so much as always. Really appreciate you listening to the podcast. Now, we do this weekly, and if you're enjoying it, please hit subscribe, give us a review honestly would mean the world to me. If you guys want to learn more about setting up a food business, head to my website, www.jgreenwood.com. And guys, thank you so much. And yeah, be great.